This is how I made the Jeep Rubicon 392 XR drive 10 times better. How? With the best lift you could get for the money. I've said it a million times and I'll say it again. The Wrangler 392 Xtreme Recon is by far the best driving Jeep ever made. It handles better, it turns better, it's smoother, it's more comfortable. It's just an overall pleasure to drive. But like all Jeeps, I still wanted to lift it with a beefier, heavy-duty suspension to get more ground clearance and to make it look more badass than it looks straight from the factory. The reason I was paranoid about lifting it is there's just not a world of research and development done for these 392 Wranglers. I did not want to ruin the best driving Jeep of all time just to get a little bit of a lift. I didn't trust what these companies were putting out on the market on such short notice. So I started calling around and talking to some of the biggest companies out there about what they had to offer for the 392. And little did I know, the guys at Rock Krawler had developed their own in-house Jeep JL with a Hemi 6.4 in it way before Jeep had officially announced theirs. So these guys had an extra 2 years of development time testing many different variations of shock and coil pairings for the 392 before the Jeep was ever announced. These guys were way ahead of the curve. The kicker for me with these guys was their racing heritage. They'd been racing Jeeps for 17 years. Now, racing is the epitome of testing product. These guys were actually out there and racing these things and abusing their own product to make sure they have a solid product on the market. So when I decided to go with Rock Krawler, my gut told me this is the right decision to make. I've had this lift installed for about a month. I got my head around it, so I'm ready to share what I think makes this the best lift you could get for the money. So this is the street driving review of this kit. I'm gonna have an off-road review very soon, but I was amazed at how good this thing is on the road. It deserved a video on its own. So here are the things that I love about this kit and why I feel it makes the drive 10 times better. Number one, the smoothness of the drive no matter what speed that you're going. And that is thanks to the triple rate coils. A triple rate coil utilizes 3 different coil rates in one coil spring, which is incredible. By running a different rate on the top of the coil, the middle of the coil, and on the bottom of the coil, you are getting the best of all worlds out of one coil at any speed that you're driving. It makes the Jeep feel very crisp and very sharp and very smooth at the same time. The dead zone on top of the coil gives the coil a ton of droop and it keeps it real tight. The middle of the coil is what you're riding on majority of the time, and it's made for comfort and a smooth drive. And the firm zone in the bottom of the coil is perfect for cornering and fast directional changes. So one coil gives you a perfect ride at any speed. The well-rounded coil specifically made for the 392, and as soon as I installed the kit, first drive, you could really tell the difference and how well the Jeep drives, even better than stock. Number 2, the shocks. Now, a coil is only as good as the shock that it's paired with. You could have an amazing, expensive shock, but if it does not pair well with the coil, it's a waste of money and your ride is still gonna suck. You could end up riding on more coil than shock or more shock than coil. Either way, it's not a pleasant driving experience. If they're not made to go hand in hand and tuned with each other, you're gonna constantly keep swapping things out until you get it right. Here's what I love about this kit. This is their racing shock. Because of how the shock is made, it has a much greater cooling capacity than majority of its competing products. I'll explain why. So these Rock Krawler racing shocks are made out of thick aluminum, and they have a nitro bright shaft that goes through them. Being made out of aluminum, which most of their competitors are not made out of aluminum, automatically gives them much greater cooling capacity. Because it's fluted aluminum, the entire thing practically acts as a heat sink. So even though there's no external reservoir, the cooling capacity of this shock is much, much greater than its competitors. Because the triple rate coil is developed around this racing shock that they have, and the racing shock is tuned to the triple rate coil specifically for the 392, they pair like magic, and the drive quality really shows. It's something that kind of blew my mind as soon as I jumped in, and it was an incredible experience from day one. But I wanted to give it a month of driving before I gave you my feedback, honest opinion, and not a bunch of fluff. My number 3 favorite thing about this kit is how complete it is and how well thought out and well engineered it is. When you lift a Jeep 3 to 4 inches, you are drastically throwing the geometry of the suspension and the the steering components out of whack, which in return affects all the articulation of the components and creates a very awful driving experience. When you get on Google and you search for why does my Jeep, some of the top results are why does my Jeep wobble? Why does my Jeep shake? These are the reasons these things happen. So if you're not going with extended control arms or adjustable control arms, you are essentially shortening the wheelbase of your Jeep. What does that do? That gives you less caster, and on top of that, it throws off your axles completely. And without caster correction through longer control arms, your Jeep's gonna constantly feel like you're driving in heavy winds, and it's gonna put way more driveline stress on the vehicle in general. You wanna make sure you have a kit with all 8 control arms adjusted for the right size. Another cool thing about the lower control arms is they are bent upwards, giving you more ground clearance. Most companies ship you control arms that are either straight or they are bent sideways. Rock Krawler bends their control arms upwards, giving you way more ground clearance. Now for the real magic in these control arms. The joints. The joints are what make this lift feel so good. They are semi-spherical joints, which means they give extra flexibility. They can hit angles other lifts cannot hit. And on top of that, they are no maintenance. You don't have to grease them. You don't have to take care of them. You just put them in and you go. It's a no maintenance product and there's no noise. It's a crisp feeling joint. The semi-spherical joints on these control arms is what gives this Jeep the flexibility that you want, but also gives you that crispness and ride quality. There's no loose rubber bushing, there's no play there, there's no noise, there's no squeaking. It's just perfect. I honestly can't believe I'm running an aftermarket suspension on this thing. I was so blown away with how well the XR drives stock that I didn't want to sacrifice that. Not only did I not sacrifice it, I made it 10 times better with this lift kit. I'm honestly shocked by how good it is, and I highly recommend this lift, guys. My fourth favorite thing about the lift is the steering components. These are things that are often overlooked and they create major headaches for people that lift their Jeeps. It came with a front and rear track bar, both adjustable. Now you want to upgrade your front track bar at the bare minimum because that will help work wonders in how your Jeep's geometry of the steering system is lined up and help it articulate correctly, which means you're going to get better steering and you're not going to get bump steer, you're not going to get wobbliness, dead zone, or death wobble in the front end of your vehicle, and it's going to help things not wear prematurely, which will lead to further headaches. And that's all included in this kit, and they are very good heavy duty products that you could bang up, you could take it through hell, and they're gonna serve you very well. Now the rear track bar will help enhance the roll center of the back, which will make for a much more pleasant driving experience, much straighter, and a much more desirable daily driver. So the Rock Krawler Adventure Kit gives you everything that you need to nail that perfect drive so you're not making any sacrifices to lift your Jeep. So the track bars are included, but next week we are also installing a heavy-duty drag link, a tie rod, and their pass-through stabilizer. I can't wait to get these things installed, and that's going to be a video next week about the steering system for the 392. Tune in, subscribe so you guys can see that as well. Such an awesome kit for $4 grand. And look, it's really easy to drop 12 grand on a good lift and say, hey, I got a good lift. Sure you did, you dropped $12,000 on it, maybe even more. But for $4,000, I can't think of a better lift on the market with this much engineering, this many great components, each one with a character of its own that speak in harmony together. The triple rate coils, the racing shocks, semi-spherical control arms. It just works well hand in hand, and it makes for an incredible driving experience. Really happy with this kit. So if you're looking for a lift kit for your Jeep, whether it's a 392 or not, check out Rock Krawler. They have tons of racing heritage and a lot of engineering experience under their belts, and they're making some really awesome products. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something. Like, subscribe, press all the buttons. Dave Studio Motors, we are out.